The Chicano movement was a civil rights movement that mainly took place during the 60s, parallel to the other civil rights movements that were happening during the time.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream.
This movement had many purposes, but mainly it was to protect and recognize the rights that Chicanos, or Mexican Americans, had. This is the story of the Chicano movement in Texas. The Chicano movement's cause and origins can be traced down back to the Treaty of Hidalgo, which is how the Mexican-American border was formed, which made many Mexican citizens involuntarily Mexican-American citizens, giving way to the famous quote, "We didn't cross the border crossed us." Since then, Mexican-American Chicanos have faced discrimination, segregation, and racism that they have ever since then tried to campaign against.
I remember there was a lot of discrimination going on in the towns of Kingsville and Freer against Mexican Americans and black people. They were asked to ride on the back of the bus, or not to use the same restrooms, or not to play in the same grounds. It was just very, very bad for all of those children.
In addition to this, students could not speak Spanish in class, migrant farmer workers were severely underpaid and mistreated, and Mexican Americans were unable to vote. The first organization to protect Mexican Americans from public discriminations was the League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC for short, and it was formed in 1929 and is still an active organization today. Even though this organization has done good, it has not solved nearly enough of the conflicts at hand. As years go on, more progress was achieved by Hispanic civil rights activists, with legal victories such as 1947's Mendez v. Westminster's case that made segregating children of Latin descent unconstitutional, and the 1954 Hernandez v. Texas ruling, which granted any Mexican American or any race in the United States equal protection under the 14th Amendment. These are good compromises and steps forward, but the Chicanos' battle is just beginning.
Well, the importance of voting is that you can make a lot of difference at the local election, because you can elect your school board member, your city council, you know them, you know where they live, you can go to the meetings, it's not the big deal. Although they handle big budgets, because usually local government is the largest employer, like school districts, largest employer in any city. So, and it's the largest brain trust, and it's a lot of power there. Power with money, power with policy, and power with personnel who you hire.
In Texas, it was common for a town to be predominantly Mexican American, but even despite this, the Anglo establishment set up numerous tactics to prevent Mexican Americans to vote. Mexican Americans were denied a vote because they couldn't speak English. There were poll taxes set up so the poor Mexicans couldn't get the privilege to vote. And if you're a farm worker, it was common for a boss to force your hand and to vote for their candidate of choice. To add to this, all of the candidates would be white males whose main interests were not to help the Mexican Americans.
Poll tax. The poll tax was a Southern strategy devised by the Democrats to keep the poor away from the polls, and limit who could pay the $1.75. Now, if you were poor, like in the case of Mexicans, $1.75, say back in 1960, could buy you a 100-pound sack of russet potatoes or a 100-pound sack of pinto beans. Now that made sense. To pay $1.75 to vote between one fat 50-year-old white Democrat and another one didn't make sense, so people didn't.
This is Jose Angel Gutierrez. He was a prime figure in the Chicano movement. In Crystal City, Texas, 1963, Gutierrez was among civil rights activists who put on a substantial effort in attempting to put Los Cinco, an all-Mexican American political party, in their local office of government. And they actually did succeed, which is an impressive feat considering this has never been done before in the United States.
But all we did was count the numbers and say, okay, we need 750 votes. That means we got to sell 750 poll taxes. But we did, because we had the Los Cinco, so we take control, we fix it overnight. They're your candidates, they're your people. They speak Spanish, they know what this is all about, and everybody got enthused.
But the Anglo government was not with open arms in this change, and subsequently went on to remove each and every single member of Los Cinco from office.
We couldn't keep it together. There was no legal defense fund. There was no favorable press. There was nobody interested in doing papers or reports. We were all alone. And so they picked one guy first and said, we're going to indict you for a bad check. You got to vote with us. So that it was 4-1. Then they brought up the charter saying, you got to be a resident, that you guys are migrants, so you don't live here part of the time, so you got to get out. So that it was 2-3. Now, political math is very interesting. You move one over here, and now, you lost.
After Los Cinco, Gutierrez and company continued on with this movement. During this time, the Mexican-American organizations set up to help Chicanos were very dormant in their activism for change. Not satisfied with the status quo, Gutierrez and company formed the Mexican-American Youth Organization.
And we begin to see the need for leadership renewal. The LULAC people, the American JF Forum people, the Political Association of Spanish-speaking people, the only kind of active ones. But the other two they would scold us for protesting because it's in their bylaws that they will not protest and that they will not be political. They said, well, why are you going to cut off your legs and then want to run a marathon? So that was the beginning thought. And so when you have those thoughts and you find someone else that shares those thoughts, now you got something in common. And so by the time I get to St. Mary's University in grad school, there were 4 other guys there who felt the same way. And so over a few beers and tacos and talking, we said, well, why don't we start it? Why don't we create Mayo? And all of us came from different places. So we just reached back, like I reached back to South Texas where I came from, called up folks, said, you want to join us? And they all agreed.
Mayo is known for their confrontational protest tactics, the most successful of which were their school walkouts, where thousands of students from schools all across the South, and in particularly Texas, would leave the schools, forcing them to compromise with the Chicanos' needs.
Average daily attendance is how they get money. So if you don't go, well, who's hurting? So they would beg us to come back. So we'll change the whole thing here.
While this was successful in making the schools change their policies, the students still went back to the same unchanged staff.
We went back to the same bigoted, racist teachers, ugly principals, same superintendent in the school board. We said, wait a minute, wait. We didn't fix anything. So we need to go after the school board. Well, for that we need to pay the poll tax. For that we need to register to vote. And we need to vote. So that's when we got into let's build a political party. Why are we going to give it to them?
Building off of this, Gutierrez did just that and started the political party La Raza Unida, a party that would host Chicano candidates. This party did tremendously well on the local level in Texas and South California, but as its local success grew, so did aspirations.
In a lot of places they said, we want to do that too. So it spread to 17 states plus the District of Columbia. And we elected a Chicano Raza Unida person in Washington, D.C. The curse was that people got this crazy, they say, well, we got to run somebody for governor, we got to run somebody for president. So wait, you can't run a marathon if you don't even know how to walk. So, we kind of stopped organizing at the local level to do this statewide organizing, and it didn't work out. And then we had to have a national convention to contain the 17 states, like, hey, well, let's go back to basics. No, they want to run for president, they want to run this. And so eventually, it just all disintegrated.
Today, Mexican Americans are the largest racial minority in the United States, and we have a Mexican American Supreme Court Justice. While we have made great strides since the early days of the Chicano movement, there are still plenty of conflicts for Chicanos today, and we have since then lost much of the momentum from the Chicano movement.
We didn't keep the spirit of fighting for your interests alive. We didn't keep the spirit of group cohesion and solidarity alive. And in fact, you tell people out Chicano, what do you want to call yourself that for? Like they put down the only viable social civil rights movement we had in lieu of what?
So would you think knowing about the Chicano movement and before the name changes and all that is an important step of getting back on track?
Absolutely, but you have to know your history. If you don't know your history, how do you know where you're going? Or what you went through? Or what it cost you to get to where you are? You talk to a Jewish person, you talk to a black person, talk to women, talk to a gay person. It won't take 5-10 minutes before they start telling you why they got what they got and why they're proud of their movements. You talk to one of us, we don't even want to tell ourselves.